One of the most important parts of your shelter system is the ability to rapidly put up a shelter and especially rapidly take it down, keeping in mind conservation of cordage. And probably one of the best ways to do that is by using a pre-made dedicated ridge line. It's a system that I call the rapid ridge line. I'm going to show you how to set that up real quick so that it's ready to go inside your bag when you want to set up a shelter with it later on. A few knots you have to know for this, but it starts with a 25 to 30 foot section of paracord, and 25 to 30 feet is about the maximum distance I've ever needed anywhere in the US as far as the distance between trees and being able to get all of my knots in. So it's a good, kind of rule of thumb for setting up your ridge line. 25 to 30 feet is usually enough. So get yourself about 25 to 30 feet. For me, a pull at double arm's length is about 6 feet. So that's 6, 12, 18, little knot rust, 24, and we'll call that about 27, 28 feet. All right, so that's plenty. So on one end, I want to establish a fixed loop that I'm going to use for a near side anchor, right? Whatever the first tree I go up to is going to be that near side anchor. And you can use a number of different knots, but to keep it simple and it works with my, everything I'm teaching from survival to bushcrafted preparedness, I try to use all the same knots because there's thousands of knots out there. And there are other ways you can do it. This is the way I do it. I prefer to use an end of the line bowline on this end. So what I want to do is give myself about 12 inches to work with, and I'm going to create a loop. All right, some rope terminology, since I haven't talked to you about that in this film. A bight is where you're doubling the rope over and it doesn't cross over itself. If it crosses over itself at any point, like it does here, that's considered a loop. All right, so I'm going to form a loop. I want the short end to be coming out the bottom, or coming off the bottom side of that loop. The long end is up on top. All right, from there I'm going to take a bight from the long end, take a bight and push it up through. All right, now I've started to form my bowline. This is actually the beginning of an overhand slip. It's the beginning of a marlin spike hitch. There's a number of different knots that start this way, but for the bowline, all I'm going to do is hold that bight, and I've also got what's called a clean side, which is basically the slip portion, and there's no knot formed whatsoever there. It's a slip. And then I've got what I call the dirty side on this side, where there actually is an overhand starting to form. All right, with that, the dirty side is to my left as I'm looking at it, clean side is to my right as I'm looking at it. I'm going to take the short end now, and basically coming from me out, kind of like, think of it as like bouncing the short end off of your chest and going through that bight that you've created. Push that through. I'll give myself a good 3 to 4 inches to work with, and then I'll just pinch that back on itself. I'm holding it back over after it goes through, folding it back over on itself, and I can let the rest of that go. Now, just to recap, we've got our long end, we've got our short end, we've got that clean side still to the right as I'm looking at it, we've got the dirty side still to the left. Everything is still the same. This is the bight that we pushed up through. We've basically taken a second bight and put it through that bight. So that's exactly what we've got going. Now from there, all I've got to do is grab this long end, holding this in place. I'm going to pull all that together, and I've just made a bowline. Okay, so some checkpoints on that bowline. When I'm looking at the front side, which is facing the camera right now, you're going to have a teardrop shape. Let me address that so you can see it. You've got a teardrop shape that was made from that bight that we put through here, and you have a cross locking bar that locks all of that down. If I look at it on the back side, which I'll turn towards you, it kind of looks like a bit of a triangle. I've got a fixed loop in the end, and what's called and sometimes referred to as the tag end. The short end is now coming to the inside of that loop. The hole that's formed by the bowline, this fixed loop, is not that much bigger than my hand. It could be smaller, it could be larger, but that's just how I kind of want them to come out for this ridge line. Now from here you can leave this as is, or you can tie an overhand security knot in that. So to tie the overhand security knot in there, I'm just going to go around it and back through itself. Okay? Coming around, forming a loop, and then coming right back through and tightening it down. That's just a security knot. It's not always necessary for structural applications like shelter. It's not something that you're going to have to worry about. It's just a nice step to put in there to keep that knot nice and secure. So that's your bowline. Now from there, I'm just going to kind of set that to the side and I'll come back to it. I want to show you with the bank line how to do the fisherman's loop, and we're going to use that to make a prusik loop. All right, and that's going to allow us to use grommets and attach toggles, what have you. It's just a really quick way, and it works well with this system. So I've got probably a 10-inch piece of number 36 bank line. The key to this being that the number 36 bank line is a smaller diameter than the paracord that I'm tying it on, because I'm going to be using this in a prusik loop. And prusiks are designed to grab on and hold friction and hold tight and hold place where you put it, but the prusik has to be on a smaller diameter than what you're actually tying it on. So that's why the 36 bank line is what I choose for that, and that's why the only thing I really use paracord for these days is my ridge line itself, because it's a thicker diameter than this. But anyway, the fisherman's knot, same thing, doing an overhand. What you want to think of is you're trying to create a fixed loop here. So I'm going to kind of cross those over each other. And now I'm going to tie an overhand around one leg. When I get it around that leg, I'm going to continue around with the tail and come right back through the loop that I just created. That's an overhand on one side. Now I'm going to flip the entire thing over. And I'm going to tie an overhand around this other leg. Come around, make a loop, come right back through the loop. I'm trying to get my fingers out of your way there. So now I've got basically opposing overhands. And this is also sometimes referred to as a necklace knot, because you can pull those tight. And as you put tension on those, it actually locks those overhands, those opposing overhands, it locks those into place. And I've created a fixed loop that I can use to tie onto my rapid ridge line, so that I have grommet points to tie onto rather easily that slide along that ridge line, which you'll see when I start showing you how to set up the actual shelters. But those are the main knots I want you to know for now. And we actually set this up, we'll give you a closer look at the prusik. But to create the prusik, I'll try to do this with some tension on it here real quick. Just gonna slide that over my foot so I can put some tension on this. For the prusik loop, I want to offset that knot because I don't want it in the way of the prusik. Take that bite, put that directly over, and kind of pinch it in place. Now I'm just going to take this other end and go right back through the loop after I go around this ridge line. Now I've created what's called a lark's head knot. I've got two parallel wraps inside here with a locking bar that's coming over the top. If I were to tighten that down, that's called a lark's head. What I want to do is go around one more time to create a 4-wrap prusik. So I'll come back around, back underneath that locking bar. And then I'll get all my wraps nice and parallel. And you can see now I've got 4 parallel wraps going from outside to in, and a cross locking bar. And all I have to do is tighten that locking bar up against those loops, and that will hold where it's at. So that's a 4-wrap prusik. If I wanted to get this tighter and more stable, I could go around again and make a 6-wrap prusik, an 8-wrap prusik. It doesn't really matter. A 4-wrap is enough so long as the diameter of the loop that you're tying onto your ridge line is smaller than the actual diameter of your ridge line. So that's a 4-wrap prusik. I would add a couple more of those. Usually 2 or 3 is plenty for the ridgeline. And that really sets you up to be able to throw this up rather quickly when the time comes. Go to the other end here. I'll show you how to hank this real quick so that it doesn't get tangled when it's in your pack. But again, I've only got 1 loop on here, but you would want 2 to 3 on here. But I'm going to put them on once we get it under tension so I can show you that a little closer up what I did there. So, outstretched hand. What I'll do is I'll take the bowline, the end of the line loop that I put in there, and put it on the back side because I want it out of the way, all right? Then I'm going to kind of do 1 wrap over my pinky and 1 over my thumb. Now I've got my prusik loops also are now on the back side out of the way of everything that I'm trying to do. It's back here with the bowline. If you need to adjust it, you can just slide it along the line and get it on the back side out of your way. Now I'm going to figure 8 wrap around my pinky, around my thumb. And if you don't take the time to do this, if you just throw it in your kit or use another type of kind of binding method, a lot of times what I've found is when you go to pull it out and use it, it's got tangles, it's got knots. This is a good way to produce a tangle-free method that comes out really easy. Now once I've got it basically chest level for me, about 4 feet of length, which is about where it's just touching the ground when it's hanked like this, I'm actually going to take this off and start binding it with the rest of what's left over of the tail. So I'll just take my thumb, slide it behind everything in here, like so, and grasp that so it doesn't come loose, and then pull my thumb and my pinky out of that. Now everything is in this tight little package right here. Starting from one end and working my way to the other side, I'm going to take this long end and start coming around this and stacking those right next to each other. I'm kind of using this to bind the whole thing together. Once I start getting close to the end, about 10 to 12 inches out, I'm going to put an overhand in, or sorry, I'm going to put a half hitch in. So as I come around, I'm just going to go right back through itself, just putting a little half hitch in to give it a little tension. And I'll do that for the last 2 wraps. And that way it can be flopping around in your pack. You can pick it up, you can throw it down, you can drop it, and it's still not going to tangle, right? Everything's hanked into this nice, easily manageable, rapidly deployable ridgeline. So now my fixed loop is on the outside. If I get up to a tree that I want to use for an anchor point, all I have to do is hold this in my hand, put my thumb in the loop, and I can pull out an arm's length, go around the tree, and then as I deploy this, I'm not going to get any tangles. I can just walk along and it's going to feed itself out until I get to the end. All right, so that is the rapid ridgeline system. I'll hank that up again real quick. Throw it on the back side out of your way. Come around once. Make sure your prusik loops are out of the way, and again there would be 3 of those. Figure 8 until you get about 4 feet left, which for me is when it's actually just barely touching the ground. About right there. Grab the whole thing and take it off. Take that tail, go over and around, and capture all those bites that you made on that figure 8 wrap. Once you get down to about the last 10 or 12 inches, throw a couple of half hitches in to keep some tension on there. And you're ready to go again for your next shelter location. You're not going to have any tangles. It's ready to it's set up and ready to go. So, you know, being able to put up a shelter quickly is one thing, Being able to take it down quickly is another. And this rapid ridgeline system really helps you do both. And keep yourself tangle free, because nothing will frustrate you more than having a big tangled ball of cordage. And this is also good for managing your cordage and maintaining it, and not having to cut cordage, take knots out. It's a very simple system to use, and definitely the one I recommend that you put in your go bag for sure.